Hello out there. Welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Kind of a light news day. Not a lot going on. Got a couple articles here I'm going to go over tonight. But I got to tell you, I'm all kinds of geeked out here. If you haven't checked it out yet, in a very recent Joe Rogan podcast, he had a guest on by the name of Bob Lazar. And Bob has a documentary right now also on Netflix. If you just look his name up on Netflix, you'll find the documentary. But it's some really, really bizarre shit. And I highly recommend you watch the documentary and then go check out Rogan's podcast because it's excellent. But it's got me all kinds of weirded out, man. I got to be honest with you. This whole thing's got me super geeked out because if you hang around with people like scientists and engineers enough, you figure out real quick that they kind of have their own sort of vernacular, the way that they talk about things and the way that they explain things. So that was the first thing I got when I saw, and I kind of did it a little bit out of order. I started watching the podcast on YouTube first. Well, I know, bad Matt. I do download them all too. And if you don't, please do that. That helps a ton. But I was watching it and I was really intrigued by this guy because it came off to me. It was very evident right off the bat that he has a very technical background at the very least. And so then I bailed on the podcast and went and watched the documentary and then came back and finished the podcast. But this guy is pretty unique. And some of the shit that he's talking about, like I said, has me completely weirded out because it's, like I said, it's apparent to me that he has some sort of, he's a physicist of some sort. He runs like a scientific supply company, but this guy is not someone that's unlearned, although apparently, we'll just do this, right? I'll tell you who he is. He's an American physicist who claims to have worked on reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology at a site called S4 near Area 51 or Groom Lake's operating location. Lazar said that the UFOs use gravity wave propulsion and are powered by a then unsynthesized element 115. And that's one of the things that kind of weirded me out because he was talking about this element back in the 80s. And by the way, this is the guy that came out public and sort of broke that there even was an Area 51 per se, except for the people, obviously, that worked there. But he was the one that actually brought it sort of into the public's attention. And he was, like I said, he was talking about this element back before it was even on the periodic table. It's there now. That's one of the weird things about this. And he also, in the documentary, you'll see he was talking about back in the 80s security systems and different sorts of security devices that no one even believed existed, but it's come out now that these things existed and they existed then, and they were only used on like super high security type of installations and places of this nature. So anyway, it's a fascinating thing. If this guy is, like I said, he's got me completely geeked out. I can't wait to find out that I'm wrong, but I am very convinced that this guy, at least if he's making this shit up, it's one of the most convincing, fabrications I've seen. And like I said, I will love to be surprised to find out that this guy is some sort of master sociopath and can just spin a yarn at the level that he's done it at, and being able to maintain so much of his original claims and story even to this day. So if you haven't checked it out and you want to have trouble sleeping at night, go ahead and check that out. Like I said, it's a documentary on Netflix. And then check out the Joe Rogan podcast. His name is Bob Lazar. It's Boblazar. And just Google this guy, man. He's fascinating. I highly recommend it. But all right, so covering the news. This one comes from Unilad. Thousands petition Netflix to cancel Good Omens, but it's on Amazon Prime. Like, this shit really happened. More than 20,000 Christians have signed a petition demanding Netflix to cancel Amazon Prime's series Good Omens, which is excellent, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I binged it in a day. The wifey and I sat down and did it, and it's funny. I don't know. It's definitely British campy, but I like that, so I really enjoyed it. The television series is adapted from Terry Pratchett's and Neil 1990 fantasy novel and was released on Amazon Prime last month. However, thousands of disgruntled Christians have now signed a petition for the series to be canceled, but unfortunately addressing the wrong streaming site. The 6-part series, starring David Tennant as the demon Crowley and Michael Sheen as the angel Azithriel, sees the two working together to prevent the coming of the Antichrist in an imminent apocalypse. Before Pratchett's death, it's alleged his last wish was to adapt the novel they wrote together. However, Christians rounded together by the Return to Order campaign of the U.S. Foundation for a Christian Civilization are calling for the series to be canceled. More than 20,000 people have signed the petition, which says Good Omens is another step to make Satanism appear normal, light, and acceptable, and mocks God's wisdom. Their complaints included the fact God is voiced by a woman, Frances McDormand, and that the Antichrist is a normal kid, adding this type of video makes light of the truth, error, good, and evil, and destroys the barriers of horror that society still has for the devil. Yeah, man, you got to stay afraid of that devil character. If you're not afraid, then I can't tell you what to do. So here's a big one that came out, and I saw this all over social media. This one comes from Gizmodo. No, using a cell phone is not causing you to grow a horn. You might, and boo, Washington Post, fuck you. What the hell were you even sharing that for? You might have heard recently from publications like the Washington Post, NBC, and of course Newsweek that some people are growing a horn or a spike out of the back of their skull from using a smartphone too much. For anyone who was excited about gaining a futuristic protuberance, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the science isn't quite solid here. Studied by Australian researchers David Shahar and Mark Sayers at the University of the Sunshine Coast spread across the Australian media with headlines like, quote, younger generations are growing horns in the back of their head. These papers have now been cited by journalists around the world. The researchers studied abnormally large bony projections that seem to grow from the base of some people's skulls. The resulting news coverage claims that increased screen time has caused more of these growths in younger people. But these studies don't actually prove a connection between phone use and the size of these so-called horns. One of the frequently cited papers says it in the abstract, quote, we hypothesize EEOP, or enlarged external occipital protuberance, may be linked to sustained aberrant postures associated with the emergence and extensive use of handheld contemporary technologies such as smartphones and tablets. It's a hypothesis, not a proven hypothesis. Most people who share the article are probably surprised that we even have such a piece of bone in our head at all, let alone that some people have an enlarged one. So, see, this isn't... Oh, God. And it kills me that, like I said, it was Washington Post, NBC, and Newsweek. They jump on this kind of shit. This is this chasing the clickbaity headline type stuff. And, and then the shit spreads like wildfire, and they wonder why nobody trusts them or has any sense of feeling that these organizations have any credibility anymore. Well, it's because of shit like this. That's why. This one comes from Big Think. Are we confusing money with well-being? New Zealand's leaders believe so. New Zealand's recent budget policy puts the health and well-being of its citizens over economic growth. Politicians love to flaunt economic growth. A wealthy gross domestic product means an economy is doing well, which means the country is doing well, which means its citizens are doing well. It's all thanks to sagacious policy crafted by our savvy political leaders. Man, I hope that's sagacious. That sure looks like sagacious. Tell me if I'm wrong. That's the rosy narrative anyway. In truth, GDP measures the average of per capita output in an economy overall, but tells us little about the prosperity of individual citizens. For example, GDP can increase in tandem with the income inequality. Social mobility can be squashed even with a prosperous economy. Corruption can take root in countries, and production measurements can ignore consequences such as environment degradation. Some economists argue that our love affair with GDP needs to end and be placed with more robust economic measurements. As Nobel Prize laureate Michael Spence told The Atlantic, many of us think we would benefit from a multidimensional approach that captures things people care about. Missing from economic growth are many things: health, distributable aspects of growth patterns, sense of security, freedoms of various kinds, leisure broadly defined, and more. Yeah, I'm down with more leisure. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has taken up that call. Last month, the island's nation unveiled its new well-being budget, a policy designed to put the health and happiness of its citizens at the economic forefront. New Zealand's new economic policy will shift away from growth and production as a measure of economic success. As noted in the New York Times, its new focus will be on goals like community and cultural connection, and equity and well-being across generations. While other countries have reconsidered traditional economic matrix, New Zealand is the first to initiate such a well-being guided policy. Quote, "This is not Woolly that's critical," Ardern said at the World Economic Forum's 2019 meeting in Davos. "This is how we bring meaning and results for the people who vote for us. It's not ideological either. It's about finally saying this is how we meet expectations and try to build trust back into our institutions again, no matter where we are in the world." Well, there's a good idea. I don't know. I think, and I heard this said before, once you get beyond a certain amount of income, beds only get so comfortable, pillows only get so soft, food only gets so good, and everything else is kind of relative. But, when Dave Chappelle walked away from $50 million, I heard him say one time, he had like $10 million in the bank, and he said the only difference between $50 million and the $10 million he had in the bank was a ridiculous $40 million. So I don't know. Maybe we are measuring this shit wrong. Who knows? This comes from Insider. Archaeologists found hidden tunnels below infamous Alcatraz prison. Archaeologists confirmed a long-time suspicion of historians and say that the famed Alcatraz prison was built over a Civil War era military fortification. Well, I was hoping for, I don't know, Native American tunnels or something, something that would have, I don't know, like the place was cursed. Anyways, researchers found a series of buildings and tunnels under the prison yard of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, which once held Al Capone. San Francisco Gate reported Tuesday. A study published last week in the Near-Surface Geophysics said archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar and terrestrial laser scans and historical maps and photographs. That's a lot of ands. They found fully buried structures, ammunition magazines, and tunnels. Quote, "This really changes the picture of things," study author Timothy DeSmit, an archaeologist at Binghamton University, told PBS. "They weren't erased from the island. They are right beneath your feet." Archaeologists are now planning more study to discover what else lies just below the surface. Historians believe workers built over existing structures when the prison was built in the 20th century. Alcatraz first came to the attention of the U.S. government after it took control of California from Mexico in the 1840s. Its location in San Francisco Bay made it attractive for military fortification purposes. Chris Rock is rebooting the Saw franchise. This comes from Nerdist. I want to play a game. You love Chris Rock and swear you'll watch anything he's created, but are you willing to keep that promise if it means starting over entirely with the Saw franchise? Okay, that might not be as gruesome as a typical jigsaw puzzle, but it's a hell of a lot stranger, and it's really going to happen. Yes, Chris Rock, one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time, is rebooting the famed horror franchise. Deadline reports that Lionsgate, Twisted Pictures, and Rock are working together to breathe new life into the popular franchise after Rock went to the studio with his idea on how to bring it back. Lionsgate Motion Picture Group Chairman Joe Drake said that when Rock, quote, described in chilling detail his fantastic vision, that reimagines and spins off the world of the notorious Jigsaw Killer. They were all in on it. It probably also helped that Lionsgate would love a way to bring back such a successful moneymaker, since the 8 Saw movies have made $1.2 billion in worldwide ticket sales. Rock wrote the story, which will be adapted into the screenplay by Jigsaw writers Pete Goldfinger and Josh Stolberg, with Rock serving as executive producer and Darren Lynn Bosman, who was behind the camera for 3 Saw films, directing. Lionsgate has set an October 23rd, 2020 release date for the untitled movie. What will the movie look and feel like? The studio promises, quote, "It will still be as mind-bending and intense as all the previous Saw films and will be completely reverential to the legacy of the material while reinvigorating the brand with Rock's wit, creative vision, and passion for this classic horror franchise." Okay, that isn't very helpful, but we're still excited to see Chris Rock take on Saw. I don't know about this, but if anyone, I mean, comedians can have some of the most twisted shit in their head anyway. Kind of comes with the territory, right? If you know anything about them or read anything about their history or biographies. A lot of dark shit inside of comedians generally. They're covering up for some pain. So this could be interesting. I've seen the first couple, but then it just got kind of wore out on me. I'm like, yeah, puzzles, people dying, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll wrap it up there. Check us out at www.knowshitcast.com. That's KNOWSHITCAST.com. Make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. The Grey Wizard of Historical Knowledge should be back with me here real soon, probably the next show, I'm hoping. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to give us a rating on iTunes. If you like what we do, please share us. It would be greatly appreciated, folks. And we will catch you all next time. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Bicycles.